The sharp scrape of a chair echoed through the classroom like a gunshot. Mira stood slowly, her torn shoes creaking as she shifted her weight. The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly. Mrs. Aldridge's voice sliced the silence. "Mira, is that what you're wearing to school?" "Really?" she asked, a smirk playing across her lips. The class turned. A wave of murmured laughter rippled through the room. Mira's head stayed low. She whispered, "Yes, ma'am," almost inaudibly. The teacher took a few deliberate steps closer. "Are those shoes falling apart?" she said loudly, pointing. Mira didn't move. "Come to the front," Mrs. Aldridge commanded. The walk felt like miles. Whispers turned to chuckles. A boy muttered, "Did she crawl here?" When Mira stood before the blackboard, Mrs. Aldridge said, "Ladies and gentlemen, here's what happens when we don't even try." The laughter roared. Mira's lips tightened, eyes shining but unyielding. She turned to return to her desk, one step at a time, surrounded by jeers. But her back? Perfectly straight. Mira didn't lift her head for the rest of class. The world became static, voices muffled, pens scratching, the rhythmic tick of the clock behind her. Her eyes stared blankly at her notebook, at a faded sticker of a shooting star clinging to the torn cardboard cover. "Reach higher," it once said, the letters now cracked and peeling. She traced it gently with a fingertip. Around her, laughter still lived in low bursts. She caught whispers like smoke. "Homeless girl. Why doesn't she just stay home?" Mira's hand trembled slightly, but her grip on the pen never loosened. Mrs. Aldridge's voice droned on, emotionless now, flipping pages in a textbook. The only sound that mattered was the thud of Mira's heart, steady, contained, unbroken. She whispered to herself under her breath, "They don't know me. They don't get to decide." Time crawled. Every minute was a stretch of agony. Behind her, someone whispered, "Bet her socks have holes too." A ripple of snickers followed. Mira didn't flinch. Her muscles ached from staying so still. Her breath stayed quiet, shallow. Then came the sharp sound of a phone camera. Click. She turned slightly. Across the aisle, a girl was grinning at her screen. Their eyes met. Mira didn't blink. The girl faltered, then lowered her phone. The power in silence, Mira discovered, could be louder than screams. She turned back to her book, her hand now steady. Let them laugh. She was writing every detail in her mind. One day she'd remember them. One day they'd remember her for something else. Something they'd never forget. Mrs. Aldridge never paused. "Open to page 213, she said, tone dry, unaffected. As if the humiliation she caused was simply part of the curriculum. She paced back to her desk, tapping her pen on the surface as students obeyed. Mira opened her book with measured grace. No rush. No panic. The teacher's voice droned on about historical revolutions. None of the students noticed Mira wasn't listening. She was thinking, not about France or kings, but about justice. What it meant. What it looked like. What it felt like to be humiliated and choose not to cry. Her heart was burning with something sharper than shame. Mrs. Aldridge glanced at her once. Mira looked right back, not flinching. No defiance, just truth in her stare. The teacher looked away first. The bell rang, and students burst out of their chairs. Backpacks zipped, chairs scraped, voices rose. Mira stayed seated. She waited until the crowd emptied, her movements deliberate. She didn't want anyone walking behind her. Once alone, she stood, gathered her notebook, and walked slowly toward the door. In the hallway, a group of girls laughed as she passed. One of them mimicked her walk. Mira didn't react. She stepped into the sunlight, blinking. The brightness didn't feel warm, just honest. Her shadow stretched long behind her as she walked across the empty school courtyard. Her shoes flapped softly against the concrete. She didn't look back until she reached the gate. Then, just once, she turned to face the building, etched it into memory, and walked away. Mira stepped into their apartment, a cramped third-floor unit in a crumbling complex with peeling paint and flickering hallway lights. The door creaked shut behind her. The smell of reheated lentils hung in the air. Her mother stood in the kitchen, hair pulled back, apron stained, hands moving quickly between pans. "You're late," she said gently without turning. Mira hesitated. "I stayed to study," she lied. Her mother turned, face tired but loving. "You don't have to hide it. I saw the post." Mira froze. "I didn't want you to worry." Her mother stepped closer, placed a hand on her shoulder. "What they see isn't who you are. But don't forget it either." Mira nodded slowly, eyes lowered. In the background, her younger brother sat at the table coloring. Life moved on, small and worn, but solid. Mira walked over to him and ruffled his hair, and he grinned up at her. In this small space, filled with flickering light and the clatter of dishes, she found a kind of fragile peace. Later that night, Mira sat cross-legged on the worn carpet, her brother beside her, math workbook spread between them. He squinted, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. 3 times 7? She asked. 21, he beamed. Mira smiled. You're getting faster. He reached for a crayon and drew a tiny star next to the answer. Like yours, he said, pointing to her notebook. Her eyes flicked toward the faded shooting star sticker. Yeah, she whispered. Just like that. Her mother watched from the kitchen, face unreadable. Mira felt it, a weight behind her smile. Her brother saw only strength, but her mother saw something else, endurance. Mira tucked her leg under her, kept helping with the homework. In this moment, she was more than mocked shoes and viral photos. She was a big sister, a daughter, a teacher. And in a house with nothing new, that meant everything. The house was quiet now. Mira sat alone at the table, shoes off, feet curled under her. Her notebook lay open, but she wasn't studying. She stared at a blank page, the pen unmoving in her hand. Her mind raced instead, flashes of laughter, the click of that camera, the teacher's smirk. She exhaled hard, flipped the page, and began to write, not homework, but a letter. Dear Mrs. Aldridge, it began, I may wear torn shoes, but I walk stronger than you'll ever see. The pen flew across the page. You taught me something today. That silence is louder than cruelty. She paused. The words weren't for the teacher, not really. They were for herself. To prove she could still choose power, even in the quiet. As she wrote, her jaw unclenched, her breath steadied. She wasn't weak. She was waiting. For the right moment. And it would come. Her mother sat across from her now, phone in hand. Do you know what this is? She asked. Mira looked up. On the screen was a name she hadn't heard in years. Her father's. An email from a law firm blinked on screen. I thought it was junk, her mother said. But then I remembered, he never gave up on his patent. Mira leaned forward. The water purifier? Her mother nodded. Apparently it passed review. They want to license it. The investors said it's a game changer. The world slowed. Mira stared at the screen. They said he always believed it would help people, but they never believed in him, until now. Her mother's voice broke. Mira whispered, he didn't give up. And neither will I. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was filled with awe, and something rare in that apartment. Possibility. That night, Mira lay in bed, the sound of traffic humming through the window. She stared at the ceiling, arms folded beneath her head. Her shoes, still torn, still humbling, sat at the foot of her bed. She didn't look at them with shame anymore. They had carried her through pain. Through fire. They had survived. Just like she had. She closed her eyes. For the first time in days, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. A quiet smile touched her lips. She whispered her father's name like a vow. The world had laughed. But it wouldn't laugh forever. A storm was coming. Not loud, not angry, but certain. Mira was the storm. And in the morning, she would rise. The next day, Mira walked into school just like any other morning. Same hallway, same faded hoodie, same torn shoes. But everything felt louder. Every voice, every glance, every snicker bounced off the walls like echoes from yesterday. As she walked past lockers, a group of students burst into laughter, just a little too loudly. One boy leaned to another and said, "Here comes Charity Case." Mira's hands tightened on her backpack straps, but her pace never faltered. She passed them without looking. "Maybe she got those shoes from a trash bin," someone whispered. Another added, "She should just do us all a favor and disappear." Mira didn't break stride. But the words followed like shadows, cruel, clinging. Even the silent students, the ones who didn't mock her, still stared with that hollow gaze. Not kindness. Not cruelty. Just indifference. And somehow, that was worse. Inside the classroom, things didn't improve. Mrs. Aldridge didn't even look at Mira as she took attendance. "Some of us showed up properly dressed today," she announced to the room without naming names. Mira sat quietly in her seat, eyes fixed forward. A girl behind her coughed "hobo" under her breath, triggering more muffled giggles. Mrs. Aldridge continued, unconcerned. She knew. She heard. But she let it happen. Mira blinked slowly, inhaled through her nose, and flipped open her textbook. Her fingers hovered on the page, refusing to tremble. Behind her, another voice whispered, "Maybe we should start a fundraiser for duct tape." Mira didn't move. Her heart pounded, but her face gave nothing away. The desk felt colder today. The light, harsher. Every moment tested her silence. But she refused to give them what they wanted. No tears. No flinches. Just stillness and pride. Midway through class, Mrs. Aldridge paused. "Mira," she said, voice deceptively polite. "Come solve this on the board." Mira rose slowly, the scrape of her chair louder than expected. As she walked to the front, the classroom hushed in anticipation. Her shoes flapped faintly with each step. Once there, she picked up the chalk. "Go on," the teacher prompted. Mira began solving the problem. Her handwriting was clean, precise. A boy snorted. "Hope the chalk doesn't fall apart like your shoes." Laughter erupted again. Mrs. Aldridge didn't stop it. Mira paused, but didn't turn around. She finished the last line, then turned to face them all. Her eyes scanned the room. Calm down. Unblinking. "Is it correct?" she asked. Mrs. Aldridge hesitated. "Yes." Mira nodded once, returned to her seat, the weight of their laughter suddenly lighter. Because this time, they had nothing left to say. Later that afternoon, Mira sat alone in the library. She tucked her feet under her chair so no one could see the shoes. Her notebook lay open not for schoolwork, but for armor. She wrote everything. What they said, how they laughed, how it felt. Not to relive it, but to own it. To take back the story they tried to write for her. A librarian passed and gave her a small, tired smile. It was the only kindness she'd seen all day. Mira looked up, returned a quiet nod, and went back to writing. On the page, she was free. In ink, she had control. She wrote, "They think silence is surrender, but silence is strategy." Her hand didn't shake this time. Across the room, the same girl from class walked in. Their eyes met briefly. The girl looked away first. Mira lowered her pen, lips tightening into something close to a smile. As school ended, the halls filled with noise and movement. Mira took her time. She waited, letting the others leave first. As she exited the building, the sky was cloudy, the air heavy with the smell of rain. A group of girls stood near the gate, scrolling on their phones. One of them pointed at Mira, whispering, then laughing. Mira didn't flinch. She walked past them, head held high. A sudden gust of wind caught her hoodie, pulling it back slightly. She kept walking. A car splashed through a nearby puddle, the spray soaking the edge of her jeans. Still, she didn't stop. The voices behind her faded. The school building loomed behind her, gray and uncaring. But Mira's walk said something else. This isn't over. Tomorrow is coming. And when it does, they won't laugh. That evening the apartment buzzed with energy Mira had never felt before. Her mother paced the living room, clutching her phone. "They're flying someone in tomorrow," she said, disbelief in her voice. Mira stood frozen. "Who?" Her mother looked up. "A man from Horizon Ventures. They've acquired the full rights to your father's patent. They want to meet us in person tomorrow morning." Mira blinked. The words didn't register at first. "Wait, why us?" Her mother smiled for the first time in days. "Because the paperwork is in my name now, and they want you there too." Mira stepped backward, stunned. This wasn't a dream. Her father's invention, a low-cost water purifier built from scraps and sacrifice, was about to become something real. "They said it could help thousands," her mother whispered. Mira whispered back, "He always said it would." For the first time, hope didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like arrival. The next morning came like lightning. Mira stood in front of a mirror, wearing freshly ironed clothes she hadn't seen in years. Her mother brushed her hair gently. "He'd be proud," she said. Mira nodded, speechless. Outside, the rumble of an engine drew them to the window. A black Rolls-Royce idled at the curb. A man in a sleek suit stepped out, holding a briefcase and scanning the building. "That's for us?" Mira asked, stunned. Her mother nodded. "Get your shoes." Mira glanced toward the battered pair. But beside them was a new box, a gift from the investor, overnighted. Inside were pristine leather shoes, polished and simple. Mira hesitated, then reached for them. "I'm still me," she said. Her mother smiled. "Exactly." Mira laced them up, one loop at a time, like she was sealing a promise. Today wouldn't erase the pain, but it would rewrite how the world saw her. In the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, Mira barely breathed. The leather was cold beneath her fingertips, the city rushing past the tinted windows. Next to her, her mother spoke quietly with the Horizon Ventures representative, a young, sharp-eyed man with kind manners. "Your father's design was 10 years ahead of its time," he explained. "We ran tests. It passed everyone. Now we're ready to scale it globally. You'll have equity." Mira stared at him. "Equity? Me?" He smiled. "It means you're not just watching, you're owning it." Mira leaned back, the words ringing in her ears. Her fingers brushed the clean hem of her sleeve. She wasn't in a fantasy anymore. She was in the middle of a change so massive it felt surreal. She looked out the window, and for the first time in her life, saw the school building not as a prison, but a proving ground. As the car pulled up to the school gate, silence filled the cabin. Mira stared at the familiar facade, cracked walls, rusting bars, and that same broken flagpole leaning slightly to the left. But today, it didn't tower over her. She stepped out slowly, polished shoes touching the concrete. Across the street, students stopped mid-step. Conversations died. Phones came out. The Rolls-Royce gleamed behind her like an omen. Mira didn't rush. She adjusted her backpack, smoothed her shirt, and walked forward. She could feel their eyes, wide and stunned. Whispers chased her steps. "Is that Mira? No way. What happened?" And still she walked, no flinch, no glance back. The girl with the broken shoes had arrived in silence. But the silence now, it belonged to them. Inside the school hallway, everything slowed. Students stepped aside as Mira passed. She didn't gloat, didn't wave, didn't speak. Her eyes were calm, steady. Her backpack rested easily on both shoulders. She moved like someone who'd already won. At her locker, a group of girls whispered. One of them, one who had laughed the loudest days before, looked up and actually smiled. Mira met her gaze, nodded once, then turned away. That was enough. As she reached her classroom door, she paused, glanced down. On her feet were the new shoes, but she still carried the old ones, tied together by the laces, hanging from her backpack. A reminder of who she was, of what they did, of what she'd become in spite of it. Then she stepped through the door. Not broken, not small, not forgotten, and not alone. Mira entered the classroom with steady, deliberate steps. The room quieted almost immediately. Backpacks froze mid-unzip. Phones hovered but didn't lift. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to pause. Mrs. Aldridge looked up from her desk, expression unreadable. Her gaze flicked from Mira's new shoes to the gleaming edge of the luxury car visible through the classroom window. Mira said nothing. She walked to her seat like it was any other day, except nothing about today was ordinary. The students watched her like she was someone else, someone unfamiliar. But Mira hadn't changed. They had. She sat, calmly setting her notebook down, her old shoes still tied to her backpack. Not hidden. Not forgotten. Her silence filled the space heavier than any speech. No applause. No smug smirk. Just quiet arrival. And an unspoken reminder she had walked through fire. And here she was, unburned. Mrs. Aldridge rose slowly, placing her pen down. The room was still. "Mira," she said, voice neutral but brittle. "Could I have a word?" Mira stood without hesitation. She followed the teacher into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them. "You seem different today," Mrs. Aldridge said, forcing a smile. Mira met her eyes. "No, just finally seen." The teacher blinked. "I didn't mean to." "You did," Mira interrupted, her tone calm even. "You meant every word, and now they all remember it." Mrs. Aldridge's smile faltered. "Mira, let's move forward." Mira didn't nod, didn't speak. She simply pulled the old shoes off her backpack, held them out between them. "You taught me a lot," she said, "but not what you think." The silence stretched long. Then Mira turned, left the shoes on the bench, and walked back in. When Mira returned to class, something had shifted. No one laughed. No one whispered. Even the usual loudmouths stayed quiet. She slid back into her seat, opened her book, and picked up her pen. A few seconds passed before a girl, 2 rows back, raised her hand. "Can I sit with you at lunch?" she asked, voice unsure. Mira looked up, slightly taken aback. "Sure," she said quietly. A moment later, another student added, "Those shoes, are those the ones from that photo?" Mira turned, met the question with unwavering eyes. "Yes. And they carried me farther than any of you could have guessed." The student lowered his gaze. Mrs. Aldridge re-entered the room, visibly flustered but silent. Mira didn't look at her again. Her focus was on the page in front of her. But the class? The class was looking only at her. Later that day, word spread like wildfire. The girl once mocked for her shoes was now being whispered about for something else entirely. She came in a Rolls. Her dad was some kind of inventor. They say she owns part of a company now. It wasn't just gossip. It was awe. In the hallway, even the teachers began to notice. One gave her a nod of approval. Another offered a small smile. And the ones who had ignored her, they suddenly remembered her name. Mira walked past them all. Head up. Shoulders relaxed. She didn't stop. She didn't gloat. She carried herself like she belonged here all along. Because she did. A boy near the lockers clapped once quietly. Then another followed. Mira didn't turn around. But her lips curled slightly. They had shamed her in public. Now, they respected her the same way. As Mira exited the school that afternoon, the Rolls-Royce was waiting once more. But this time, she didn't look at it first. She turned instead to face the school building, old bricks, faded banners, cracked pavement. The place where she had once felt invisible, where she had once wanted to disappear. Now, it stood as a witness. Mira reached into her backpack and pulled out the letter she had written. The one she'd never planned to share. She folded it once, twice, and tucked it into the frame of the school's community bulletin board. No name. No signature. Just the words, "To the next girl with broken shoes, don't lower your eyes, lift them, and walk forward." She stepped into the car and closed the door softly. This time the silence wasn't heavy. It was full. And hers. In the quiet of the teacher's lounge, Mrs. Aldridge sat alone, staring at a copy of the school's internal email. The subject line read, "Special mention, Meera Rao, Innovation and Resilience Fund recipient." Below it was a photo. Meera beside the Horizon Ventures rep, shaking hands in front of the school. Mrs. Aldridge's fingers tightened around the mug she held. She wasn't mentioned. No one acknowledged her role. But she knew. The damage, the moment, the lesson, none of it had disappeared. A knock at the door pulled her out of thought. A staff member peeked in. "There's someone here to see you." When she stepped out, Meera stood waiting. Dressed neatly. Calm. Not angry. Just present. "You asked for a word yesterday. I gave you one. Here's another. Respect. Earn it, or lose it." Then she turned and left. No bitterness. Just boundary. Back in the classroom something had shifted. The students who once ignored Meera now listened when she spoke. She answered questions with quiet authority. When group assignments were announced, hands shot up to partner with her. But Meera chose who she worked with carefully. She sat next to the quiet ones. The watchers. The ones who had once looked away, not out of cruelty, but fear. She saw herself in them. And with each new connection, Meera built something more lasting than fame or revenge: community. At lunch, she shared her table with kids who had once eaten alone. She didn't need a throne. She needed a circle. One built not on status, but strength. She had no crown. But still, she led. Because leadership didn't come from who applauded you. It came from who you carried forward. In the weeks that followed, Meera's story made its way beyond the school. Local news picked it up, then a national blog. "Girl in torn shoes becomes tech heir," read one headline. But Meera didn't speak to reporters. She declined interviews. She wasn't interested in being a symbol. What mattered to her were the girls who now walked with heads higher, who kept their backpacks open, who didn't flinch when called on. And sometimes when she was alone, Meera would take out the old shoes, still dusty, still fragile. She never cleaned them. Never threw them away. They weren't shame. They were the proof. The camera never caught those moments. No microphone recorded what she whispered to herself when she held them. Just 4 words. "This is my power." On a cool Saturday morning, Meera and her mother stood in front of a community center. A modest sign above the door read, "The Rao Foundation, Shoes, Scholarships, Self-Worth." Inside, kids of all ages lined up, giggling as they tried on new sneakers and filled out scholarship forms. Meera didn't give speeches. She helped lace up shoes. She passed out juice boxes. She sat cross-legged on the floor and listened to stories. Her mother watched from a distance, eyes damp. "He'd be proud," she whispered. Meera looked up. "He always told me people don't need charity. They need chances." That day, Meera gave away 78 pairs of shoes. Not one of them was meant to replace shame. They were meant to replace silence. She never asked for thanks. Her reward was the sound of new footsteps starting again. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Meera walked through her neighborhood alone. No cameras. No audience. Just the hum of distant traffic and the quiet rhythm of her own feet. Her steps were confident. Not because of new shoes, but because she no longer feared where they'd take her. She passed the corner store where she used to buy tape for her soles. The alley where she'd hidden during lunch once. None of it haunted her now. These streets had made her. They'd watched her struggle, then rise. She stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, looked up at the wide sky above, painted in amber and ash. She whispered, "I'm still walking, Papa." Then she smiled. and walked on. Not toward an ending, but toward everything waiting beyond it. Morning light filtered through the school gates as Mira walked back into the building, not with fanfare, not with reporters, but with quiet routine. The air was crisp, the kind that made you feel fully awake. Students moved around her, not staring anymore, just nodding. She wasn't spectacle now. She was presence. A girl held the door for her. "Good morning, Mira," she said softly. Mira smiled. "Good morning." It wasn't about shoes anymore. It was about space, how she filled it, how she held it, how she changed it just by refusing to disappear. She passed the hallway bulletin board. Her note was still pinned there, unmoved, unread by some, memorized by others. No one said a word. They didn't need to. They felt it. The silence she once endured now walked beside her, but this time it was hers. And it had weight. Inside the school, the day had just begun. Lockers opened and closed, sneakers squeaked across floors, and classroom chatter grew. But Mira moved through it like a current, unchallenged, natural. She passed her old locker, once dented and scribbled on. Now clean. A folded paper stuck out from its vent. She pulled it loose. No name. Just a single line. "Thank you for not breaking." Mira stared at it, fingers tightening slightly. A silent message from someone who had watched her walk through fire and take none of it out on others. She folded it carefully, tucked it in her pocket, and smiled. Not for pride, but recognition. Quiet revolution, it turns out, leaves echoes. She didn't know who wrote it. She didn't need to. The words were enough. Later that day, in a school-wide assembly, a surprise announcement was made. A scholarship fund had been established in honor of local innovation and perseverance. "The Rao Award," the principal said, "will go to students who rise through struggle without ever asking for applause." Mira stood quietly at the back of the auditorium. No spotlight turned to her. No speech followed. And she preferred it that way. In the silence that filled the space after the announcement, a few students turned their heads. One clapped. Then two. Then the whole room. Mira didn't bow. She didn't wave. She just stood there, eyes steady, expression soft. Not for recognition, but for proof. Proof that sometimes justice comes not with thunder, but with stillness. As the crowd left the auditorium, Mrs. Aldridge lingered by the exit, clutching a folder. She watched Mira walk past, waiting for her to slow down. But Mira didn't. No nod. No glance. Just quiet footsteps moving forward. Then, just before reaching the door, Mira stopped. She turned slightly, not fully. "You don't get to erase what happened," she said softly, barely above the hum. "But you can choose what happens next." Then she walked out, sunlight streaming through the open door ahead. Mrs. Aldridge stood frozen. Not attacked. Not forgiven. Just seen. And left to sit in the weight of her own silence. No. For the first time it wasn't Mira who had to carry it. Outside, the world continued. Cars honked, leaves rustled, someone dropped a book in the distance. But in the center of it all, Mira stood by the gate one last time. She looked down at her shoes, new, clean, polished. Then slowly reached into her bag and pulled out the old pair. Without drama, without a word, she placed them on the bench beside the gate. A girl passing by paused. Mira met her eyes. The girl looked down at the shoes, then back up. Mira nodded once, then turned and walked away. The final shot? Mira from behind. Walking calmly into the light, shoulders straight. No music, no sound, just the quiet crunch of gravel beneath her steps. Some victories don't roar. Some just walk away.